Welcome back, everyone.
Here we are once
Oops, we did-
again, joining laughing because we're goofy and talking about stuff before we start taping. Yep.
Well, Dana said, okay, so I'm just gonna cut to the chase. Is that what it
Yeah.
is?
Yeah. Isn't that weird? Cut to the chase. Yeah.
What does that come from? Gosh, we're gonna look that up and it's gonna be like mired in some awful history.
Exactly.
Um, I'm just gonna jump to the punchline. I don't know. You guys, I don't know, whatever. Just correct me. Yeah, I don't know.
Keep
We're
talking. I'm
gonna
gonna look up cut to the chase. Talking.
we wanted to talk about verbal impulsivity. And I said to
We're,
Dana, I can't relate at all. And then we just
yep.
both started busting up, which is basically Dana's way of saying, yeah, you do it all the time. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And it actually doesn't have a horrible history. It's from the
oh,
20s, early filmmaking, where people wanted
okay.
to speed up to the engaging part of the film, which was usually a chase scene or something. So, hey, finally,
That's
something that isn't
good.
mired in horrible colonizing
Yeah.
murder and mayhem. And yeah, awesome. So, cut to the chase. Okay.
You guys, that's so good. I love knowing
Yeah,
where those, I don't know why, but I always really like understanding where these
I know.
sayings
I do
come
too.
from.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like so
So, this is a
interesting.
perfect example of this idea of verbal impulsivity. Again, another phrase that I think I've known this is a thing in myself and other neurodivergent people forever. But here, seeing that phrase, verbal impulsivity, I was like, oh, okay. Anytime I see the word impulsive or impulsivity, I get a little, I get a little screechy because I was told so often as a kid to not be so impulsive. And it couldn't have been anything more different. It wasn't impulsive. I would usually have all these thoughts on something before I made a move, and people just weren't privy to it. But this idea of verbal impulsivity, I know we've mentioned this phrase before, being accused of diarrhea of the mouth as a kid a lot. Such a lovely, wonderful image to have. But really, saying things that come to your brain as they say them without a filter, right, could be a way of defining verbal impulsivity, like I have to say this thing. Now, I know for myself, when I'm with other neurodivergents, we can get each other going and it works because it's like, ooh, this thought, that thought, this thought, this, that, and we can sort of go there with each other. I'll see this happen in my classroom a lot of times if I have someone who's neurodivergent who wants to add a lot to the lecture or have an example of things. And then I can see the other, like the neurotypical students kind of getting irritated. The neurodivergent students are like, oh yeah, I didn't think of that. But everybody else is like, do you have to say something again? And it is a sense of, for me, I had to learn, like, only actually say something maybe like every 5 thoughts. Yeah, I had to literally do that for a while so that I wasn't, because I can almost always, like in a lecture as a student, I could have something to say about almost everything that teacher would say, or a question or something, which for me was flushing out the learning. If I can make associations, it gets in there really quickly. But that having to sort of say something and having a thought on every little discrete piece of stuff can be really annoying to other people. And the impulsive part of it is almost like having to say it and then feeling like if you can't say it in a certain amount of time, you're going to forget what you had to say.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to barf it out. Um, or you're distracted so much and waiting for the lull in the conversation to say what your thought is. Now you're not even tracking what's happened in the conversation that can happen. And then you finally say something and the people are like, wait, what? And it doesn't seem even contextual anymore, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's a processing thing. Like that's how we process, and wanting to do it out here is difficult when we can't do that because our brains are continually popcorning up new ideas, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just for fun, I
Did you look up verbal impulsivity?
There's no such.
Oh, okay.
But I was laughing because, of course, I was gonna say for S and giggles, and then I was like, wait, where does that come from? I'm like, oh no, back to impulsivity. Okay. Um, this is what Wiki says about impulsivity in general. And like I will say, as psychologists, impulsivity is a risk factor for us when we're
Yeah.
evaluating someone's safety.
Oh.
If someone's like impulsive and now we've got like ideation and we've got other
Mm,
things, we're like, oh boy, we
mm,
really need to
mhm.
look at this differently than someone who's like pretty locked down, I'll
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
in psychology, I'm quoting from Wiki,
Mm,
impulsivity or impulsiveness is a tendency to act on a whim,
mm.
displaying behavior characterized by little or no forethought, reflection,
Yeah,
or
it's all
consideration of the
really negative.
consequences.
Yeah. Yeah.
Impulsive actions are typically, quote unquote, poorly conceived, prematurely
Mm.
expressed, unduly risky, or inappropriate to the situation that often result in undesirable consequences.
Yeah, I'm reading the AI and say having all those, it does say verbal impulsivity, but it's all those negative things that you're just reading. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very
Um,
negative. Yeah.
Impulsivity can be classified as a multifactorial construct. A functional variety of impulsivity has also been suggested, which involves action without much forethought in appropriate
Mm.
situations that can and does result in desirable consequences.
Mm. Oh,
When such actions have positive outcomes, they tend not to be seen as signs of impulsivity, but
right.
as indicators of boldness, quickness, spontaneity, courageousness, and
Yeah. Quick thinking.
unconventionality.
Oh, so it's the outcome that determines whether it's good or bad,
So, by the way,
right?
choose your people and your place right.
Yeah. Oh,
Thus, the
geez.
construct of impulsivity includes at least two independent components. First, acting without an appropriate amount of deliberation,
Mm.
which may or may not be functional. And second, choosing short term gains over long term ones.
I just don't have that amount of forethought before something. It's just more like an idea, an idea, an idea, and then I want to get some of my. And as I've aged, I've sort of figured out. Okay, I had 5 ideas. Here's the theme of all of them in one nugget. But kids aren't going to be able to do that, you
Well,
know?
and the reality is they're all related. Like
Yeah.
when I'm sitting with my clients and we are popcorning all over the
Hmm.
place,
Hmm.
there's always a thematic link
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
connects
That's
all
right.
of those pieces.
Exactly.
So it might be, you know, then I thought about Chicago popcorn, like caramel and cheddar cheese.
Oh
There
yeah.
might
Yeah.
be like different things, but it's like all delicious.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah. You're
delicious
right.
separately, it's
Yeah.
delicious together, it's delicious.
It's like something else
Um,
I read of a mom taking their ADHD kid to a therapist for the first time, and the kid bouncing off the walls, and the mom apologizing and wanting to stop him, and the therapist just saying, "No, it's fine. Let him bounce off the walls." It is sort of that. Are we going to take that popcorn in a way, like you said, to use it in therapy? It's usually got a theme to it, what they're expressing at any given point in time. You could say like a free association, which we know we use as projectives and things like that. Treat it all that way, right? Makes sense to me.
there's a meme. I don't know if it's a meme, but it is a picture that I
Mm-hmm.
use a lot in therapy. And something that I see my role as is organizing information and helping
Yeah.
to connect dots.
Yeah.
So the meme is like this the client, I'm assuming it's the client,
Mm-hmm.
in their talk bubble, it's just a bunch, it's like a tangle of yarn.
Mm. Oh, I've seen this one.
Have you
Yeah.
seen
Yeah.
this? And then
Yeah.
the therapist or whoever's on the other side, their bubble has woven the yarn into three
Yeah.
organized
Yeah.
balls, right?
Yeah.
And I love that idea because
Yeah.
I my brain is always trying to, and I think this is why I love therapeutic work,
Yeah.
is because I'm always trying to organize that information.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter how loose or tenuous the
Yeah.
associations are.
Mhm.
And it's funny because I always think like if someone sat in our session as a fly on the wall, I'm not sure that they would see what we were I don't
Oh,
know if they
absolutely.
would see
And
what we
that's
were
the
doing.
criticism that the cognitive behavioral therapists have of us. They're like, well, what is the point of what you're talking about? I'm like, oh, you have to see the larger picture and looking for themes and things like that. Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes it's a stretch, to find those. You have to get to kind of know someone's way of being and what words they
Yes.
tend to use. You have to figure that out. Um, and things that seem loose actually are associated. You just have to kind of sit with that person long enough to learn those things. And then you can point it out to them, and they're like, oh, I didn't know. The goal would be for all that uncrazy yarn to be, I'm going to teach you how to put these into little balls, or even better yet, knit a really cool sweater out of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's that version of,
Totally.
from the last episode, me learning to scan the grocery shelves in a pattern when I can't
Yeah.
find something. Because if I keep just doing it randomly, chances of me finding it aren't going to be great. But
Yeah.
that's something that I've had to learn. Otherwise, just get frustrated going because I can't find anything. So yeah, that popcorn thing, the use that it has, I think it gets tolerated in kids way less. Especially if just when you write all those definitions. I was looking at AI definitions and all the negative, cutting people off, inappropriate or hurtful, blurting out. And that's a great word, blurting. I have to just take a echolalia minute here. Blurting. Isn't blurting one of those words that sounds exactly like what it is?
I totally. What is
Blurting.
that? What
Yeah.
is that
So they're
called?
all negative. Yeah.
There's a name for words that sound like that
Sound
are
like
spelled,
they're,
sound like they
yeah,
are anyway.
like
Um,
syrup of epicac. Sorry, I'm totally. There's an example right there of boom, an association, and now I have to like
Hilarious.
say it out loud. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just really funny. It's funny because on Wikipedia, you can't pull up verbal impulsivity like on Wiki, like
Oh,
on
yeah. Oh,
Wiki. That's why I was
yeah,
saying on
yeah,
Wiki, like it doesn't
yeah.
exist on Wiki. But I
But
think
it
the
does
other
on an
piece
AI
too,
search. Yeah.
and I'm thinking about the space that therapeutic environments offer
Mm-hmm.
that are very unique and specific and unlike
Mm-hmm.
any other space that like kind of exists, right?
Yeah.
So we have the luxury, and I say this a lot of times to, especially to parents. I'm like, look, I have a luxury,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
my luxury is I get to give that person space and
Yeah.
room to breathe and real estate where they don't need to mask. I don't
Yeah.
want them to mask. I
Yeah.
want this to be a place where they can come. And so, yeah, sometimes the associations look really loose and all over the
Yeah.
place. And, my job is to sit and reflect
Mm-hmm.
and sit and organize and sit and understand. And then over time, what happens, because it does
Mm-hmm.
take time,
Yeah.
um, those things I start to understand
But
how
that
this
pattern
person communicates.
recognition, yeah,
Mhm.
and our ability to see patterns really helps there because you're
Yeah.
making those associations. It's ironic, isn't it? The person having the associations being accused of not having associations, and then they come to therapy for us to say, "Oh yeah, they do associate." But we're the doctor, so we can tell you.
Yeah.
But I also feel like what I learned in my own therapy when I would get those associations back that you're talking about, like us to sit, and then my therapist would say something back to me, I'd be like, oh, so she was teaching me to see those connections in a way, really, right?
Yeah.
And then the goal is to have it be where you can find those connections on your own, so you're not in therapy until you're 95, unless you
Yeah.
really want to be. But yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
makes
Well, I
perfect
mean, I
sense.
think the thing that I find is that a lot of clients want to stay in therapy because it's the only place where they can actually kind of
Hmm.
figure things out without
Hmm.
having judgment.
Yeah, yeah,
And there's
yeah.
a patience for it. And I think that's a really interesting,
Hmm.
place to be.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I was thinking about, and this came up in our last conversation too, as we were talking about inattention and
Hmm.
inattentive blindness, but um, the social skills groups, right? Like this idea of
Hmm.
social skills groups.
Hmm.
One of the questions I ask is when they're with their people,
Hmm.
how are their social skills? Like, are they bumping into social skills problems? And the
No.
answer 95% of the time is no.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm like, so where you feel they don't have quote unquote social skills is when you're trying to put them in environments where they really either don't have like similar communication styles, they
Hmm.
don't have the similar interests, or there is a very prescribed way of being,
Right.
of
Hmm.
expectation in that environment.
Yeah.
So, those we need to look at putting them into less often.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think what if I were to sum up, if I were to thread what Dana and I are kind of talking about, there's not, there is some beauty to verbal impulsivity. Um, it's just not tolerated everywhere.
Right. Exactly. Well, and I rarely give like an actual hardcore, here's a technique like helpful on this podcast. But it's even occurring to me in my own life if I'm in a meeting or something like that with people that don't appreciate or understand that way of being, if I can even be writing a bullet point for my thoughts out to capture them, first of all, because sometimes it feels like if you don't insert it, then you're going to lose it. Can I do, if I know that's what's going on for me, because I know what that feeling's like, I'm like, oh my God, I'm get really excited. Can I look at those 5 things I've just written down? Is there a theme between those and then share the theme? I'm wondering about, I had these thoughts and this is how they relate. What do you guys think? Whereas a neurotypical minds might be doing that automatically. It might be that we need to do it sort of on a scratch pad out here
More
to notice our own
manually.
themes. Yeah. Yeah.
Dana, might I even suggest?
Mm. Yes, please.
Might I even suggest that maybe for some neurotypicals, they don't even they're not even thinking about these things in such a big or robust way.
Right. Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's another thing that I see in these brilliant autistic minds, to be quite
Mm-hmm,
honest,
mm-hmm,
is,
mm-hmm.
and this is why they're so much more anxious than I am. Okay.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I can
Exactly. That's
think of
right.
like 2 ways S is going to go down, and they just thought
Mm-hmm.
of like 100. So,
Yeah.
like, the 98 more ways that, like things could go bad. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God, no wonder ignorance, like that idea of ignorance is bliss, right? Like,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
wow, like ignorance really is bliss in that
Yeah,
sense.
it's also why I think it's not realistic for an autistic person, maybe even an ADHD person, to never have anxiety. The goal should never
Oh
be to
no,
rid yourself of anxiety
ever.
until because you won't ever. It's how to deal with it. Yeah.
I also say to people, like people who really suffer from major depression, and
Mm-hmm.
have major depressive episodes,
Yeah. Yeah.
and those that have anxiety, I am pretty upfront when I
Yeah.
start working with someone
Yeah.
that we're not going for a zero.
Right.
And
Exactly.
actually, I'm sorry, but this is going to be your friend.
Yeah.
Like
It's
you're going to need
probably
to
how your
befriend
brain's
this.
wired. Yeah. Yeah. For a whole host of other reasons. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like we got to kind of learn how to I think it was Winston Churchill, it might have been
Mm.
Winston Churchill who used a black dog as an analogy for his depression. And he would
Oh.
always say like this is my companion, and like, and the idea, if you bring that, if you just kind of extend that analogy, the idea
Yeah.
of like sometimes you need to bring it for a walk, sometimes you need to crate it, sometimes you need to like how do you
Yeah.
what the attend to it and care
Yeah.
for it, and it really like, so there's kind of this relationship. And it used to, when I was younger, I really felt very strongly about this, but I always felt so
Mm.
worried that if I had said this to a client that it would be
Mm, mm.
discouraging. And
Oh,
um
yeah,
but
yeah,
instead what I found, because I found like when we don't set our expectations correctly
yeah,
or appropriately for this, and you jump from therapist to therapist, med to
yeah,
med,
yeah,
expecting for your depression to be gone or your anxiety
yeah,
to be gone,
yeah.
what ends up happening is that the client or the person ends up feeling like they're the broken ones and they're the faulty ones because
Mm,
it doesn't
mhm.
happen.
Right. Sort of like when I
So,
work with chronic pain folks and in my own journey with that, it's not to get rid of it completely, but it is to do what I can to impact it, have a relationship with it. Because it's not, I'm never going to be free of it because of the reasons that it's caused. They're not ever going away, they're degenerative. So it'll always be there. So how can I form the best relationship I can with it? Knowing that it waxes and wanes and what tools do I
mhm,
have? And there's going to be
mhm.
times when it totally sucks. and other
Mhm.
times where I don't notice it and I don't
Yeah.
seem to be able to control necessarily when and where and how.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it. And as soon as you're given the reality of it, it's like, okay, it's sort of like if I can be afraid of a boogeyman in the basement my whole life and have to run up the stairs every time thinking it's going to get me, or I could turn around and look. If you turn around and look and there's nothing there, awesome. You've been afraid for no reason.
Yeah.
Nine times out of 10, you're going to turn around, there's going to be a boogeyman there, but now you know what you're up against,
Yeah.
right? What if it's just like this big and you can just squish it?
Yeah.
Like every morning when I make my pudding for my afternoon and the boxes I throw on the floor because I love the feeling of stomping on them. I'll think of you. I don't have to use too much imagination to whose head I'm exploding every morning. It's
I
that,
just
right?
I just know it's not mine, so I can giggle. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's selfish, but
So, but that sort of thing, like to know what your foe is, to know what you're up against, and what are ways you can get feeling empowered. So that's
yeah.
how I sell it. If we're talking about anxiety or depression, that is might be lifelong, and anxiety in the case of a neurodivergent.
Oh,
How do we get it to the point where you can have a relationship and live with it? Right? It's not realistic to
yeah.
get rid of it completely. Yeah,
Yeah, you know, I think
yeah,
that's just us, just bringing sunshine and
yeah.
rainbows.
But that impulsivity, though, that verbal impulsivity, to bring it back to the topic, is part and parcel of that rapid thinking
Yeah.
is can feel anxiety provoking if you don't really understand that's what's going on. So you can
Yeah.
know, oh, okay, I'm rapid
Yeah.
switching and making connections and so on. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oftentimes I feel like that's also just flow of thought. There's a
right,
lot of thinking that's happening, right? It's just
exactly. Yeah.
the information highway. It's like, there's just so many cars on that highway
Yeah.
that, it's hard sometimes to figure out what to say or what not to say or
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
say it. And then,
Yeah.
this does relate to the attentiveness
Yeah.
that we were talking about in our previous episode.
Yeah, and there's going to be things that you're doing in your life that rapid thinking is going to be useful, right? I'm thinking of my vet tech career wasn't a verbal thing, it wasn't like that verbal impulsivity, but say for example there was an animal who was uncomfortable. I was continually like, could it be this? Could it be this? Could it be this? Could it be this? And whereas someone else would give up on it, I'm like, I think they just need something. I'm looking at, they just need something to put their chin on. And it would sound so dumb, but something like that, I'd roll up a towel and put them on there, and then they okay, that, and they'd be like, well, how did you figure that out? I'm like, I don't know, I just tried 17 different things.
Yep.
So it was adaptive in that case, right? To try
Yep.
to figure a solution to something can be really adaptive. And in our line of work, I think trying to find the pattern, trying to help can be really useful. If I could see it could be a problem in a different job, where you're just continually irritating the people around you because you're having that, and then maybe find something else that takes advantage of the way your brain works and your skills.
Yeah.
Find a place in the world that enjoys that. Yeah.
I mean, this comes back to self-awareness. We often come
Hmm.
back to the space of
Yeah.
understanding yourself, of having good self-knowledge so that you can make the best decisions of where to be in the world,
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
fit you the best. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of done with this idea of, well, you just need to buck up and pick yourself up by
Right.
your bootstraps and make it work because that's just the way the real
Yeah.
world works. I'm like really done with that. I'm like so
Yeah.
done
Yeah. We are
with
the real
that.
world. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Which makes me think of the
Exactly.
song. Do you remember the song? We
Which one?
are the world.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so wow, Dana and I do not actually go off on tangents at all because we
Never.
always end up back on our topic.
Yeah. We try. We try.
Thank you for coming on this tangential journey.
Yeah.
Welcome to Tangential Journeys with Dana and Gwen.
Yes. Hi. Wait, what?
What were we talking about
On
again?
that note, yeah.
Oh, verbal impulsivity. Bye,
Oh yeah.
everyone.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There we go. Yeah. Oh my God. That's too funny.
Hi. Or the oh, how about the joke? The knock knock,
Who's there?
impatient cow.
Impatient
Moo.
cow. Who?
Okay, bye. Bye, everyone. See you later. Be good to you, be good to others. Bye.